It was a cold Thursday night in mid-January, and Jerry's bar, a small, dimly lit dive nestled in the outskirts of town, was unusually quiet. Only a handful of regulars sat nursing their drinks, murmuring to one another or scrolling through their phones. The bartender, Dave, was wiping down glasses behind the counter, glancing occasionally at the door in hopes of more patrons walking in. But as the night dragged on, it seemed like it would just be another slow shift. At around 11:30 p.m., the door creaked open. A man walked in, his presence immediately unsettling. He was tall and thin, dressed in a black coat that seemed too heavy for his frame. His face was pale, almost waxy, and his eyes, dark, sunken pits, seemed to flicker with a strange intensity. The room fell silent as he strode to the far corner of the bar and sat down without a word. Dave forced a polite smile and approached him. "Evening, what can I get you?" he asked, his voice more upbeat than he felt. The man didn't respond immediately. He stared at the counter, his long fingers drumming a slow rhythm against the wood. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "Whiskey neat." Dave poured the drink and slid it over. The man took it without a thank you, raising the glass to his lips and downing it in one smooth motion. He placed the empty glass back on the counter and stared at it, as if expecting something to happen. "Rough night?" Dave asked, trying to make small talk. The man's lips twitched into what might have been a smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "You could say that," he murmured. Dave wanted to ask more, but something about the man's demeanor kept him from prying. Instead, he refilled the glass and moved down the bar to check on the other customers. Yet, even as he chatted with the regulars, he couldn't shake the feeling of the man's eyes on him. As the clock struck midnight, things began to get strange. The temperature in the bar dropped noticeably, and a faint, foul odor wafted through the air. It smelled like damp earth and decaying leaves. One of the regulars, an older man named Hank, wrinkled his nose and muttered something about a sewer leak. Dave shrugged it off, though he couldn't deny the smell was unsettling. The man in the corner ordered another whiskey. His movements were deliberate, almost mechanical, as he raised the glass and sipped it this time, his gaze fixed on something unseen. Dave noticed that none of the other patrons seemed to want to sit near him. In fact, Hank and a younger couple sitting at the bar had moved closer to the door, their unease palpable. At around 12:30, the jukebox, hired a good smack to work, suddenly came to life. It played a slow, mournful tune that no one recognized. Dave frowned and walked over to it, tapping the machine. "Weird," he muttered. "It's not even plugged in." The air in the bar grew heavier, like a storm was about to break. The man in the corner leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed as if he were savoring the atmosphere. "Do you feel it?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Dave froze. "Feel what?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted an answer. "The pull," the man said, his voice almost a whisper. "They're close now." "Who's close?" Hank piped up, his voice shaking. The man turned his head slowly, his dark eyes locking onto Hank. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the man smiled, revealing teeth that were unnaturally sharp. "You don't want to know," he said. The lights flickered, and the jukebox's eerie tune grew louder. The smell of decay intensified, and the room seemed to tilt slightly, like a ship on rough seas. One of the regulars screamed as the shadow of something large and grotesque flickered across the wall. Dave grabbed the edge of the bar to steady himself. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice rising in panic. The man in the corner chuckled, a low, guttural sound that didn't seem entirely human. "You've been good to me, Dave," he said. "So I'll give you a piece of advice. Close the bar, lock the doors, and don't look outside." Before Dave could respond, the man stood up and walked to the door. As he passed, the other patrons shrank back, their faces pale with terror. The man paused at the threshold and turned back, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "They'll be here soon," he said. "You'll want to be gone before they arrive." With that, he stepped outside and disappeared into the night. The door swung shut behind him, and for a moment there was silence. Then, from somewhere far off, a low, unearthly howl echoed through the darkness. Dave didn't wait to find out what it was. He shouted for everyone to leave, and within minutes, the bar was empty. He locked the doors and pulled down the shutters, his hands trembling. No one saw the man again, but Jerry's bar never reopened. Dave refused to talk about that night, and the regulars who had been there moved away or stopped speaking to anyone in town. But every so often, on cold January nights, people swear they hear the faint sound of a mournful tune coming from the boarded-up building, and a low, gravelly voice murmuring, "They're close now."